Hi friends, and welcome to The Woman is the Wallpaper. For the next couple of minutes, we're going to explore some of the deeper symbolism and historical context of Charlotte Perkins Gilman's The Yellow Wallpaper. So I first read this story 3 weeks ago when it was assigned to us. My initial reaction was this. It's a story by a woman intended to be understood by women. The narrator is in a negligent marriage to a man who manipulates her into believing that she is severely ill. He cuts her off from the outside world and prohibits her from indulging in her work. Ultimately, she is driven crazy by those restrictions. The reason I felt like it was intended for women was because of how women tend to be more subjected to abusive and manipulative relationships, especially at the time that this story was written. Strip Cover Lit is a YouTube channel run by two English teachers. They review all kinds of literature and are very entertaining. In my next few slides, I will be referencing a theory brought to my attention by their video. So on the very first page, the narrator is describing the house that she and her husband have moved to. The house is the most beautiful place. It's quite alone, standing well back from the road, quite 3 miles from the village. It makes me think of English places that you read about, for there are hedges and walls and gates that lock. Keeping this quote on your brain, and moving forward through the rest of the story, you'll see that she too is isolated, quite alone, and at the end of the story, she locks herself away. In short, Gilman's narrator is the house, but that not just the house, she is the room and she is the wallpaper. At this point in the stripped cover video, I had to pause. I'm not great at identifying symbolism, so this was a big eye-opener. At this point, I'm going to move on to historical context, but please keep that symbolism in your brain. Addressing the theory of the house being representative of the woman is necessary for a later point. Most of this analysis, however, involves the relationship between the yellow wallpaper, the time when it was written, and the woman who wrote the story. This is John Green. He is a writer who has a channel on YouTube designed to give students a deeper knowledge of whatever they're studying. I learned a lot about Gilman's history from his video. Charlotte Perkins Gilman was born in 1860 and died in 1935. She was best known in her time for being an activist and a feminist, but we know her best for being a writer. She had 3 famous feminist aunts who helped raise her, as her parents weren't very present for her childhood. And she was married twice. Her first husband didn't particularly value her as a human being. Perkins' inspiration for the yellow wallpaper came from her experience in 1884, where she married Charles Stetson, and within a year gave birth to their daughter Catherine, who was her first husband and the one who didn't care too much about her. So when she fell into postpartum depression, she was given the treatment that most women do when they have symptoms of hysteria. Hysteria at the time was an all-encompassing term used to describe any sort of mental illness that women were dealing with. And the treatments were wide and mostly unethical. Gilman was given the rest cure by her doctor. And this is a quote that came from her autobiography that I found in an article by Neva Atlas. This wise man put me to bed and applied the rest cure, to which a still good physique responded so promptly that he concluded that there was nothing much the matter with me, and sent me home with solemn advice to live as domestic a life as far as possible, but to have 2 hours of intellectual life a day, never to touch a pen, pencil, or brush again as long as I lived. This was in 1887. I went home and obeyed those directions for some 3 months, and came so near the borderline of utter mental ruin that I could see over. So there were a lot of treatments for hysteria, and nobody really took women very seriously as far as treating those symptoms of actually greater mental illnesses. Gilman's recount of the rest treatment seems to be the only kind that she received, but there were many others that were equally, if not more so, unethical. That was Gilman's whole point to all of this, was that these treatments aren't working. The narrator in the yellow wallpaper is being treated for postpartum psychosis, which is a more serious degree of postpartum depression, and can include hallucinations and self-harm. But she's being treated via the rest cure for what they have deemed hysteria. She is so isolated and restricted from writing, which is the only thing that brings her joy. So back to the point about how the house is a woman. At the end of the story, the woman has torn her room to shreds. She's ripped the wallpaper off of the walls, and the whole room is in disarray. This is actually meant to be symbolism for self-harm, which she falls into due to the psychosis, which isn't being treated properly. Currently, we all know how big of a deal postpartum depression is. We know that it affects 1 in 9 women, and in some regions, it's as many as 1 in 5 women. We know how to identify the symptoms. They include withdrawing from loved ones and feeling numb and disconnected from your child and worrying about your ability as a parent, and there are instances of frequent crying and anger. And then, as previously mentioned, psychosis includes hallucinations and suicidal thoughts and self-harm. Gilman, at the time, just wanted to bring the attention to people that these treatments for whatever was going on weren't correct and they weren't working. And she did inspire a lot of social change. She wrote in an article in 1932 that the yellow wallpaper has, to my knowledge, saved 1 woman from a similar fate, so terrifying her family that they let her out into normal activity and she recovered. But the best result is this. Many years later, I was told that my own doctor had admitted to his friends that he had altered his treatment of neurasthenia since reading the yellow wallpaper. So that was my presentation. If you guys would like to respond to this video, I would really love if you could ponder an answer to the question of, if you were to write a story to inspire a change in society as Gilman did, what would you write about? And this doesn't have to be about a personal experience, but just something that is important to you that you could put into an inspirational piece of fiction to inspire social change. And here are some citations.